Hello and welcome to another episode of Iraqi Nutrition Podcast. Today I have with me Dr.Brad Dieter. Brad, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Juma. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. And today's topic is peri-workout nutrition. But before we start with the questions, could you just give us a brief introduction and about yourself and your background and what you currently work with?
Yeah, so my background is I've got a master's in biomechanics and a PhD in exercise physiology. And right now I'm doing a fellowship in metabolism and end organ complications, and specifically in diabetes. So I've done a lot of research in nutrition and exercise and kind of metabolic pieces and how those relate to disease and physiology and things like that. And so kind of my professional career is in everything from metabolism, molecular biology, and kind of epidemiology level stuff. And then kind of my passion is the nutrition side and kind of the sports nutrition and relating that to people. So my background is, it's fairly diverse and spent probably too much of my life in the classroom, but it's all been good. So the research is fun and exciting and very challenging, but it's a good gig.
Interesting. So you're the expert on all the difficult stuff. Like, I used to, I always tell people this. I used to hate biochemistry until I read James Morton. He has a great book on biochemistry specifically for exercise metabolism.
Hmm.
And that's when I fell in love with biochemistry because before that I used to hate biochemistry because I didn't understand anything. But
Yep.
after that I started to understand uh, everything with it.
Yeah,
So,
when you realize all that baseline stuff is what makes all these big differences, is it really starts to become interesting. And then it's kind of one of those things where when you read it and it's out of context, when you're reading Michaelis-Menten equations and KMs and all
yeah.
that kind of stuff, it doesn't make any sense until you apply it to something you're passionate about, and then it really starts to be very interesting and you want to know more.
Yeah, exactly. Because now when you look at the research on a lot of stuff, they go back to the basics, and a lot of the mechanical stuff. It's basically biochemistry.
Yep.
So that's what I struggled with in when I took my degree. That I didn't see how this fitted in with what I was supposed to work with. But then I started to realize afterwards that this was probably the most important part.
Yeah,
So
that's part of the experience and the context and the maturity. Is sometimes it takes those things to figure it out.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're talking about peri-workout nutrition today, and first question is, what is peri-workout nutrition, and why did people get so interested in this topic? Because this is a topic that a lot of people talk about.
Yeah, so peri-workout nutrition is just the idea of, does the nutrition around your workout affect the results that you get from your training, the recovery, and the adaptations from training. And a lot of this came from research, primarily in endurance athletes. Was kind of where it started. Most of sports science research originated in endurance athletes, because kind of just the historical times when sports science really kind of got a foothold was when endurance sports were kind of mainstream, a little more popular. And so a lot of the studies were basically had people engage in some sort of endurance exercise, and then use post workout nutrition to look at how that affected glycogen recovery and recovery for time to endurance trials and repeated cycling bouts and things like that. So that's kind of where it got its genesis, was these studies.
Yeah, and and and, and there's a big difference comparing endurance to resistance exercise, because especially if you consider glycogen depletion,
Hmm.
you can deplete glycogen fairly quickly doing high intensity endurance exercises, but it, you don't deplete it as much when you're doing resistance exercise. You've probably seen some research on it where they looked at glycogen depletion during resistance training.
Yeah. So and this is a great opportunity to kind of talk about a little bit of exercise physiology and biochemistry and metabolism. So when you're engaging in endurance exercise, you're using the glycolytic system a lot, because it's kind of in that window of higher intensity, but it's kind of sustained, over 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes. So the amount of metabolic work you do accumulates. I mean, that's a lot of work accumulated over and over. And so you're using a lot of the muscle glycogen stores. Now, when you're doing resistance training, even sets of 15 to 20, a lot of that work is done in the phosphocreatine system, and then a little bit is done in the glycolytic system, and then your recovery is mostly fatty acid oxidation. That's kind of the way it works. So the amount of that glycogen that gets used in each set that accumulates over a workout period is just so much smaller than this accumulation of this glycolytic work that you're doing during endurance style training. So I think, even in hard training sessions, a lot of the studies show kind of the resistance training piece uses 20 to maybe 40% at most of muscle glycogen. So those levels are substantially lower than we see in the endurance exercise. And that's why those studies, I think, were so effective at showing a lot of these glycogen recovery pieces in the original research studies.
Yeah. Yeah, because it goes very quickly, especially there's a classic study by Soltin from 1973 where they took a soccer team, divided them in two. Half of them started with full glycogen storage, and then the rest started with they have like 50% glycogen. And by halftime, I think they had like 10% left. The guys that started with half the amount, and the guys that had full glycogen levels, they had 40 left before the second half. And when you looked at their performance and how much glycogen was left after the game, the guys with full glycogen, they had 10% left, but the other guys had like zero, and probably they were tanked a couple of minutes into the second half. When you looked at the performance, the guys with the lowest glycogen intake, like the lowest glycogen levels, they walked like 50% of the game compared to 25% in the other team, and they also sprinted less. And I think the difference in how much they ran was 1800 meters during the game. So that's like I would just imagine if you had like two teams in the Premier League playing against each other, and one of the team is walking like walking 50% of the time. That would probably give a big difference on the result. So you actually see in high intensity endurance exercise how important carbohydrates and having full glycogen storage to perform better.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's and that would be kind of one of those cases where you would talk about. I guess that can kind of transition into the next piece of maybe when is intra-workout nutrition kind of important. That's been something that has kind of been brought up more in the pop culture, the fitness world online and stuff, is this idea of intra-workout nutrition and how important is it and all those sorts of things. So, it's one of those pieces where it depends on the type of training you're doing, and it depends on the length of the training. So if you're somebody who, goes in and kind of is, kind of like me at this point in my life, and I'm no longer a fairly competitive athlete. I'm a scientist now. So my training is, 5-6 days a week, hour and 20, hit it pretty hard. My need for intra-workout nutrition is fairly low, right? The amount of muscle glycogen I'm burning through and my need to really sustain a really long training session, I can do it without anything in the middle. Now, if you're somebody who is a very competitive athlete, trains 2-ish hours a day, has really heavy training sessions, that's someone who might benefit more from the intra-workout nutrition. So just knowing where you are in that spectrum is really important, because how much emphasis you put on those things really is determined by the amount of work that you're actually doing.
Exactly. So when we talk about peri-workout nutrition, it's always also talk about nutrient timing and anabolic window. So how important is nutrient timing, and is there actually an anabolic window?
Yeah, so we were talking about this a little bit before we hit the record button, but kind of like anything in science and in the world, is the pendulum always swings from one extreme to the other. And so, for a long time, it was thought that there's this 30 to 60 minute window where you have to get in a protein shake and some carbs to really get the benefit from your training. And then over the last few years, the pendulum's kind of swung the other way to just basically that there is no anabolic window. It doesn't matter. And in reality, the truth kind of lies somewhere in the middle, right? There's that gray zone, and figuring out where you as an individual lie in that gray zone is important. So to kind of contextualize it is there doesn't appear to be a magic window for most people where if you don't get in some food, you're going to lose all the results from your training session. Now on the flip side of that is there is no detriment to if you're somebody who likes to have a protein shake with a banana right after you train. It's not like you're stupid, right? That's just a time to get in some more protein and some more carbohydrates, and it might be convenient for you, maybe a good habit for you to kind of get those things dialed in. But just know that that window is a lot more flexible. So if you train and you have to go to the grocery store and you have to go get your car washed and then you get home and then you eat dinner, you're not going to have any major detriment, if you're kind of the average person. Now, there's some ideas that post-workout nutrition, getting it within, an hour or so, if you're a highly competitive athlete who's training multiple times a day, there may be some small recovery benefits, and there may also just be some habit benefits of, you probably should eat something after you work out if you have to train again. And if we can stick it right after you train, it's going to develop these habits. So that's kind of the context of that anabolic window and trying to find some of the real world applications of what the data actually shows us.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think a lot of people, when the studies came out from Schoenfeld and Alan Aragon, that people started to say, nutrient timing doesn't matter. There's no anabolic window, so you don't have to take a protein shake after work. And there was a lot of memes and jokes about this, and I think it was good that the study came out and they actually they actually talked about that it's probably not that important compared to the other stuff like energy balance and how you divide your macronutrients and stuff like that. But the one thing that I didn't like was when people started to say to people that took a protein shake after their work that they were stupid, that this was a waste and stuff. And I don't see it as being a waste. Like if you have everything else dialed in, this could be the next piece you can focus on, especially if you want to maximize your gains. But if everything else is out of order, like you're trying to gain muscle, you're not eating enough calories, you're not hitting your protein and stuff like that, it's probably not what you should focus on. So
Yeah.
and it's also because for me, I work with a lot of athletes, so a lot of them do double sessions, so it's a routine for a lot of them to just take something after the workout. But if I'm working with average Joe that works out 2 to 3 times a week and doesn't have like these huge goals of building large amount of muscles or just want to be in general good shape, we don't pay that much attention to it. So it's like you said, I think it's context, and that's probably a lot of context is missing in the fitness in the way I see it, because we get these new studies and people swing from one end to the other straight away, and like you said, they miss the gray area and don't understand that all the things you learn are tools and you can use it on different individuals. Some things you can use on average Joe, and some things you can use on athletes. So I think that's the piece that's missing.
Yeah, the context is always really important. And I think you brought up another point of it's not exactly peri-workout nutrition related, but just, a message I like to tell people is, all these different nutrition pieces of information or diets that we all have, they're all just tools, right? And each tool has an appropriate place and an appropriate time. There's times where higher carb, lower fat diets are good for that scenario. There's other times where ketogenic diets are a good tool for somebody. There's times where intermittent fasting is a tool. There's times where eating 6 small meals throughout the day is a good tool. There's times where supplements are a good tool. There's times where clean eating is a good tool, right? It's just the context amongst all these things is something that we need to appreciate and realize that we can, if we know how all these things work, we can find the appropriate tool for the appropriate person at the appropriate time. And that's a really, I think the most successful coaches out there really adopt those principles, right? Is they don't develop a system and then try to shove everybody into that system. Is they go out and they find tools that are successful and they look at their clients and they take that tool and they apply it to that client.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that comes. I think that comes with experience, especially if you work with a lot of different people. But like I said, working with athletes and working with averages, those are completely different things and completely different tools you need to work actually with them. So yeah, let's because talking about peri-workout nutrition, you always have to talk about supplements. Like that's a given. So we talked a bit about the timing. So if you're an athlete, you probably and doing double sessions, it's probably a good idea to try to fit something in within an hour or faster if you can after a workout. But if you're like, let's say it's average Joe training three times a week and doesn't have like these major goals, do you have any recommendations for them? Like, where do you fit a meal before a workout and after a workout? Do you have like these time slots that we can use there?
That's one of those things where people, everybody responds a little bit differently to trying to eat something before they train. I'm kind of one of those people where I I feel like the training piece of the quality and the quantity of your training usually drives most of your beneficial adaptations. And so getting something into your system that allows you to, have some energy to train harder and train a little bit longer is probably a good idea for most people. So even if you're training 3 days a week, trying to maximize those 3 training sessions a week. And then each person's a little bit different. So trying to find something that somebody can consume, about an hour-ish beforehand is a really great strategy to try to get some food on board so they can train a little bit harder and a little bit longer. Some people like having a supplement type kind of food, maybe a shake with a mixture of some whey protein and some sort of complex carbohydrate like a clustered dextrin or a waxy maize or a Vitargo or something like that, because it processes in their body, it sits well, they don't have digestion problems. Some people like whole foods. Some people like some chicken and some rice before they go train. So sometimes, that hour-ish window, give or take, plus or minus, 30 minutes is usually a good spot for people to try to get something in before they train. And that can be on that spectrum of whatever. It takes some trial and error. Try some of the supplement approach, try the whole food approach, and see, how your body digests it, how your body processes it, and all those sort of things, and try to find what works within that context.
Yeah, because like you said, everyone's different. Like some people feel like they could work out all day if they eat oatmeal before a workout, where other people feel that it just sits in their stomach and just bugs them during the training session. So that's also a good point. But talking about supplements, because when you look at all these pre-workout formulas, they have a lot of ingredients in them, and some of them have like acute effects that can be beneficial before a workout, while others don't have an acute effect, and they need to you need to use it over a long period of time before you see the benefits. Like for example, beta-alanine and creatine. But are there any supplements that can be beneficial to take before a workout?
Caffeine is probably the most well documented one, and kind of the safest and the one that's shown the biggest effect and most repeatable. So I tell people, if you're somebody who needs a little bit of a pick me up for a training session, caffeine is usually the best approach. You can take the C4s and the other things that have caffeine in them, and that if that's the way you want to go, because it's got some sort of flavor in it and things like that, there's usually enough caffeine in there to give you a little bit of energy. A cup of coffee works just fine. If whatever form, caffeine appears to be the most beneficial, but it's also one of the ones that it's called, you get habituated to it. So over time, it loses its efficacy. So if you take it every day before you train, eventually it's not going to give you that extra oomph you need, right? So it's kind of one of those things where a lot of people will take it, they'll stop taking it, they'll take it, they'll stop taking it, and things like that. So your body will habituate to it and then kind of slowly come off of it.
Yeah.
That's probably the best one in terms of supplements. There's other things out there that will give you a feeling of an effect. Like you mentioned beta alanine. If you take enough of it, you get kind of that tingly feely.
Yeah.
While that doesn't actually translate into any additional benefit from your workout, it just gives you that feeling. That's something to note. Whether that actually results in a placebo effect because people think it's doing something, so they mentally train a little bit harder, I don't know. That's a study I really want to do at some point in my career when I have time. Is give somebody a large amount of beta alanine and see if the placebo effect works, because for some people it might.
Yeah. I think there's actually one study where they did it with cyclists, where they actually found that the itching you get from beta alanine, it doesn't have any performance benefits effect, because that's what athletes think. Like, I have a lot of clients that say, "Oh, I'm taking this pre-workout and I started itching right away," and I tell them, "Okay, it's because of a high dose of beta alanine, but it doesn't translate into a performance benefit because beta alanine needs quite a bit of time to build up."
Bioaccumulation,
Yeah, but they've had actually done one study on it where they actually showed that there wasn't a benefit. But I can see the point that if somebody feels that and they have this placebo effect from it, that it can maybe benefit them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's one of those things that's probably not going to yield any additional results, but I think it's interesting that I think that's kind of the key piece of a lot of these pre-workout supplements. Beta alanine gives you an itchy feeling. Things like vasodilators, so things kind of like the no explode supplements due to the L-arginine. L-arginine, when you look at it, the studies either show it doesn't increase, oxygen delivery or blood flow. Some show a small increase, but then that doesn't actually result in any additional, performance benefits.
Yeah.
So a lot of these pre-workout supplements actually just work by marketing and sometimes some products that go in there to give you some sort of feeling that makes you think it's working, but it's actually not.
Yeah.
So I think that's a key piece for people to note.
Yeah.
Is
high dose of caffeine and high dose of beta alanine, which are cheap ingredients, will give you the feeling. So I actually tell people that if you want to use a pre-workout, try to find one that's right dosed, like they have high enough amounts that there will be a benefit from it with the beta alanine and with the caffeine, or just buy the ingredients for yourself and stack them yourself. Then you can tailor it to whatever needs you have, because like my recommendation for supplements are like the basic. It's creatine, caffeine, beta alanine, whey protein, vitamin D, multivitamin, omega 3s. But there's been some research recently on citrulline. I know there actually was a study in 2010, I think, that came out where they showed a benefit for resistance trained athletes. I think they did the bench press and they were able to do more repetitions in that study. But now it's also been a couple of new studies that came out. I think it was a study from Wax that came out last year that showed some benefits for resistance training, and there's quite a few studies on cyclists on endurance that shows a benefit. But you need to take quite a bit of amount of citrulline to have an effect. So a lot of supplements, they dose it at 2 or 3, but you need at least 6 to 8 grams before you will find the performance benefits you're looking for.
Yeah, that's one of the things is a lot of times supplements are underdosed because they kind of use all the things that give you kind of feedback, like the beta alanine and the caffeine, and they kind of mask the other ones.
Yeah.
I think one of the things about pre-workouts is, sometimes taking them actually is the opposite of what you want. If you're somebody who's going out for a longer run or a swim or doing some sort of like, conditioning workout or something like that, having the elevated heart rate is, and kind of the jacked up feeling is actually not beneficial. It's actually detrimental, right? Because the whole goal of those workouts is how can I produce as much work as I can without getting my heart rate up, because I want to keep, oxygen consumption down and things like that. And if you're taking a bunch of caffeine and you're taking a bunch of stuff like that, and then you're going into a workout, well, you're not going to be able to control your heart rate and your performance. So, people who are like CrossFit athletes and other athletes where, kind of controlling your performance over time, taking a pre-workout is actually going to be detrimental, and something you really should think about before you just start slamming them back.
Yeah, and it was great that you mentioned this with the caffeine, that if you use it a lot and over time it loses its effect, because a lot of people, if you drink a lot of coffee, for example, you will probably not have the beneficial effects from caffeine if you drink caffeinated coffee every day. So what I do with a lot of athletes is that we usually have, like, training programs are usually overreaching phase, and we have different phases. So when we taper, when we have a deload, which is we do deloads quite frequently, like every 14 days or something like that. We cut out the caffeine during the deload. So it's that's easy to remember as well, that when you deload, just take caffeine out. A lot of them actually don't drink that much coffee, especially during the race, because sometimes it upsets their stomach. It's a bit strange with coffee, because some of the athletes I work with, they can handle quite an amount of caffeine, but they can't handle like 2 cups of coffee. Like, I have a guy that can take 400, 500 milligrams of caffeine 30 minutes before a workout and don't have any GI problems, but as soon as he drinks like 1 to 2 cups of coffee before a workout, he starts getting problems. And we actually tried decaffeinated coffee as well, and he gets the same result. So it's not the caffeine, it's something,
the other compounds in the coffee.
Yeah. So and it's more practical to take it as a supplement sometimes, instead of drinking so much. Okay, so for pre-workout, caffeine, is cheap and a good way to go.
Yeah. That's probably the best one you can use in terms of actual translating to performance. So that's probably the only one that's well enough substantiated that you can be confident that it'll work.
Yeah, interesting. And citrulline, we'll have to see what the research said, but I've seen a lot of it coming out now, so that might be something to also, because citrulline actually has a beneficial effect, can have a beneficial effect taking it pre-workout compared to beta-alanine and creatine, for example.
So just finding a source of that's dosed high enough is going to be, you might have to buy it in bulk and just mix it yourself.
Yeah. So Intraworkout, we mentioned a little bit about it with the carbohydrate, but a lot of people also use branched-chain amino acids during their workout. Do branched-chain amino acids have benefit? What does the research actually show on BCAAs?
So BCAAs, and kind of, this is my biased opinion, is it's kind of a quagmire. The research is kind of all over the place. I think there's a lot of issues with the research published on it for some reasons that are related to industry. So I kind of have a joke about BCAAs, is I use it to flavor my water, because sometimes I hate drinking just plain water all the time.
Yeah.
I think that if you're taking BCAAs with the idea that it's going to result in a lot of extra muscle gain, your kind of faith in it is misplaced.
Yeah.
Because most of us, if you're eating a higher protein diet, you're taking a high quality whey protein, you're getting a substantial amount of BCAAs in your diet. And so if you're taking them on top of all the other stuff, thinking they're going to be the key to the next level of your training, it's probably not doing a whole lot. Now, I think there may be some benefit to taking them kind of fasted, but I think it's more, I don't know if it's from the actual BCAAs themselves, because there's the idea that the BCAAs are used more for gluconeogenesis and can be oxidized better for fuel, or if it's just the fact that you have calories on board and you're not actually training fasted.
Mm.
There's a lot of papers out there on this topic, but nothing has swayed my thoughts and opinions to show that it's just because of the BCAAs and it's not because of the small amount of calories you're taking, so you're not really in a fasted state. So I think if you're somebody who's training fasted, has all their other ducks in a row, taking BCAAs won't hurt, but it's probably not going to be the key to what's the next step in your progression. If you're like me and somebody sends you a sample and you use it to flavor your water in the morning, that's kind of my approach.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? I know everybody kind of has their own take on the literature, because we all approach all these studies with their own biases. I'd be interested to see what your thoughts are.
To be honest, I've looked at the research on BCAAs. What I find is that a lot of the research is done on endurance, and it's like you said that if you're using a whey protein shake, for example, during the day, you probably are getting a lot of BCAAs from there, and also from the other protein sources that you're eating. So I don't think you will gain any benefits from supplementing if you're already taking in enough protein. So it's not on my list of recommended supplements. But the way I use it with some athletes is if they're doing intermittent fasting, or if they're training fasted a couple of times a week, they'll take a little bit of BCA before their workout. That's the way I've done it, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, I
But
mean it's not going to hurt. So if you're taking it, once or twice a week and it's fairly cheap, it's like, well, it's not going to hurt. So
no, I agree. I used to have, like, I don't do any. I know it was popular a couple of years ago. I think it's still popular to use high dosages of BCAAs during a workout, and I've actually had two clients, when I think about it, that actually were, I wouldn't say they were depressed, but they were bit on a bit
down.
yeah,
Blue.
they felt a bit blue. And the thing is that both of them were doing CrossFit with low carb, and they were using high amounts of BCAAs, and that was before they started with me. And took some time before I started to dig in and what's causing this. And I knew that low carbohydrates could make you feel a bit low because of serotonin and stuff like that, but also BCAAs because of the tryptophan, because they compete with tryptophan in the blood brain barrier. They can lower the serotonin levels and do the exact same thing. But these guys were taking high amounts. I think one of the guys was taking 40 grams. The other was taking 50 grams of BCAAs.
Wow.
So as soon
That
as
is a lot.
yeah, because I tried increasing the carbohydrates first to see if it would have any beneficial effects to them, and it did get better, but it wasn't quite there yet. So it's first when we started to remove the BCAAs, lower the dosages, that we saw an improvement. So we stuck to, I think he kept taking 10 grams because he used to do his CrossFit fasted. So, or it might just have been that he did CrossFit, that he was feeling that way. I don't know. So
Man, that's crazy. I've never heard anybody taking that much, but
yeah, he was taking 50 grams or 10 grams. Used to fill up 50 grams, taking 10 grams for the workout, 30 grams during the workout, 10 grams after the workout. So he would go through a tub a week. So I think it got quite expensive after a while.
Yeah, that would get expensive.
Yeah.
Real
So
quick.
yeah. So to sum it up on BCA, I don't use it a lot with clients. It's only if they do fasted training and want to be on the safe side. That's when we use it, to be honest. So intra workout, a lot of people that I work with is it's both endurance and resistance exercise. So if the sessions are over an hour with the athletes, like hockey players that I work with a lot, we usually have some form of carbohydrate, but we're not talking about huge amounts, talking about small amounts, but like in the 30 grams area if they're doing 2 hour session. But if it's more than that, if you're working with a cyclist and they're cycling for a couple of hours, like 3, 4, 5, 6 hours maybe, we usually ram it up to 30 to 60 grams an hour, and some of them are up to 90 grams, like at the elite level, up to 90 grams. And then we start to actually use different types of sugars during the race, because of if you only use glucose and you want to reach 90 grams an hour, you will only benefit from 60 grams because of the transporters. So if you
Yep.
use a combination of glucose and fructose, you can take in more carbohydrates in an hour. So I think the highest amount they've actually measured is 78 grams in the research. Like if you take a combination of glucose with fructose, is 78 grams. But if you only take 90 grams of glucose, it stops at 60 grams. 60 grams a minute. So 1 gram of glucose a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jorn Tromelin, his lab did a study on that and kind of looked at actually what happens to the fructose, and it's kind of interesting that a lot of it appears like a lot of it gets turned into lactate by the liver, and then whether that ends up in the Cori cycle, back in the Cori cycle or whatever, is interesting. I'll be interested to see what they do when they follow up on that study, because having co-digestion or co-transportation of those is definitely a way to get more on board.
Yeah, exactly. I think Carter and Jekendrup, they have done a lot of studies on this topic. They've actually used different mixes of carbohydrates to see which one gives the highest oxidations of carbohydrate during exercise. So they did glucose, fructose, maltodextrin, a couple of combinations. So I think in that study it was shown that 78 grams was the highest amount. But it's interesting what you said, that with the lactate and stuff, because you want to know what's actually happening to the rest of the carbohydrates.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of like you may be able to get more fructose on board, but whether that's going to muscles or whether it's going to liver and what the liver's actually doing, is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe it helps glucose or hepatic glucose output. I don't know. I need to bug Jorn to do some biopsies on his on his people and give us some tissue.
Yeah. Okay. Post workout nutrition, like we talked about. If you're average Joe, or like most of people, it's enough to just go home, take a shower, eat your dinner, and you'll probably be fine. But if you want, like if you're an athlete, you want to maximize your gains, you're really serious about your results, and you want something to eat after you work out, like the amounts we're talking about, what if we could give some general recommendations for how much protein and how much carbohydrate can be beneficial if you're doing resistance exercise? Do you have any numbers or general recommendations there?
Yeah, so kind of the idea is to get some sort of protein and some sort of carbohydrate on board. The ratio, kind of the magic ratio, ranges anywhere from 2 to 1 carbs to protein to 4 to 1, kind of depending on the type of training you were doing, the amount of training, the length of training, with longer, higher rep, more kind of glycolytic training being on the higher side, and more just like basic strength work on the lower side. It looks like about 30 grams of protein is probably a good place to shoot for in terms of kind of a post-workout shake. If you have like some mixed in carbs in there, like whatever, if it's a supplemental carb or a banana or something, to kind of round out that 2 to 1 to 4 to 1 ratio, because it looks like the 30 grams is kind of where you max out at acute muscle protein synthesis. I mean, there's some ranges in there, and anything you take over that contrary to popular belief, isn't wasted. Your body will absorb it. It'll just kind of use it differentially until later, and then it'll use it when it needs to. But 30 grams is right kind of about where the maximal muscle protein synthesis appears to be. So that's kind of where just a target. I like that target too because most commercial whey protein, it's anywhere between 24 and 32 grams in a scoop. If you can ever find the scoop in the stupid tub, right? So yeah, that's a nice thing is if you're around 30, that's kind of a good window to start. So you just throw one scoop and you're kind of set. But then if you decide to go over, so let's say you took a snack to the gym and you've got your whey shake and then you've got some almonds and a small piece of chicken and a banana and you end up at like 45 grams, that's not like you're wasting it or anything. It'll just add to your kind of overall daily protein intake.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's one thing that I always find funny, that people say that, oh, if you do this and you go over, like if you take in 32 grams of protein, the 2 grams are wasted. Like the body doesn't absorb it and it goes through your system. And I always tell people that the body will always find some way to use the nutrition that you provided. If not, you will probably feel it on your body if you're not absorbing a lot of it. Like if you wasted a lot of the nutritious things that you're eating, you would probably notice it in some way or form. So take for example egg protein. I did a Facebook post on the other day because of I'm talking about a different thing now. But when we're talking about absorption, a lot of people have this idea that if you eat something raw, it will have a better absorption than if it's cooked. So Rocky, he eats raw eggs, and they actually did a study where they compared how much you absorb if you eat the raw eggs compared to if it's cooked or steaked or something like that. And it was a huge difference there. It was a 92% absorption if you cook the eggs, and it was right around 50% if you took it in raw. And they did this study. It was actually a study where they looked at a new technique to look at absorption of foods, and they did it on ileostomy patients. So
okay.
yeah, so I think it was 5 patients there where they did it. So the technique verified the technique that we were supposed to be using.
Huh.
So a lot of people say that eggs are 100% absorbed, but not in that study. They actually showed that it was a bit less.
Yeah, and there's a lot of foods that are absorbed better when you cook them. A lot of vitamins and minerals and things like that, especially from plant foods and stuff, are absorbed better when you cook them. Others are better when it's raw. So it's kind of there's no, you shouldn't eat all your food raw and you shouldn't eat all your food cooked. It's kind of there's a balance there.
Variation is always good.
Yeah, variation is always good.
Yeah. Okay, Brad. So let's wrap it up with the final question. What's your practical recommendations for peri-workout nutrition, like pre-workout, intra-workout, post-workout? And now we're talking about resistance training, just to narrow it down to one different topic.
I think for me, the biggest thing is find something that you can make a habit and be consistent. For all of us, consistency really is key for making progress. And so if you're somebody who really feels like post-workout nutrition is good for you, just do that so you're consistent. I find, in my experience, most people benefit more from the pre-workout nutrition. A lot of people, I think, will get better performance and better adaptations if they do a good job in a pre-workout, especially for most of us who are just trying to train in really busy lives. I know for me, some days I have to go like right after work and I eat lunch at noon. And then if I go and I work out at 6 o'clock at night, I haven't eaten anything for 6 hours and my training is just garbage. So for a lot of us, if I had to pick pre-workout or post-workout, I'd probably pick pre-workout. Lets you train harder, lets you train longer, lets you be a little more focused. You're not worried about being hungry. So trying to eat something an hour-ish before your workout with some protein and some carbs in it and trying to figure out what's good for you would probably be my second recommendation. So yeah, the first would be find what's consistent. The second would be you have to choose. Probably pre-workout's a little bit better. And then the third is, you know, peri-workout nutrition is in the context of everything else. Is, make sure before you really start stressing out about your peri-workout nutrition, kind of get your other ducks in a row. Make sure you're consistent, your overall calories are figured out, kind of the macronutrient ratio for you and where your training is and your body size and body type and all those things are kind of dialed in. And then start worrying more about the timing. So it's kind of one of those things where it's where it is in the hierarchy of importance is probably third on my list.
Yeah. Yeah, and Eric Helms has a great pyramid on this where you prioritize how you should, what types of things you should focus on. And I totally agree with you in regards to pre-workout being more important, because a lot of people need to understand also that if you're actually eating something very close to the workout, a lot of those nutrients that you actually are ingesting, they will probably be available for you at the end of the workout, because it's not like if you eat a chicken breast and 2 hours later it's gone. It's still something circulating in your system.
Yeah, exactly. We a lot of us have this idea as food just comes in and goes out, and it's kind of cyclical. The fed versus fasted periods are a lot longer than most of us think.
Yeah. And supplements that you recommended, caffeine?
Yeah. For pre-workout, that'd probably be what I would recommend. To get the most out of your workouts in general, I think creatine and beta-alanine, most people who train fairly hard would benefit from, but those they have to accumulate over time. And so taking those is a good idea. Actually, taking those post-workout with a meal appears to be probably the best time to take them. There's been some studies to show that beta-alanine is better absorbed and better accumulates in your muscles with some sort of food. Creatine, there might be a small advantage to taking it post-workout, just due to muscle uptake of anything, and so kind of taking them post-workout with your meal after you train is probably might be a way to squeak out a little bit more accumulation of those in your muscle tissue. And then I think that would probably be my supplement recommendations to kind of maximizing training and workout.
Yeah, I totally agree on those supplements. The only thing with beta-alanine is that like I know they have the carnosine, they have a slow release formula that you can take fairly high dosages without experiencing the tingling and GI discomfort. But some of the others, you have to divide the dosages. And I'm one of those person that's really sensitive to beta-alanine, so I have to split it up quite a bit to get in my dosages. And I remember that I basically suck at taking supplements post-workout. So only time I remember to take my supplements is before I go to bed.
Yeah.
So creatine is something I actually take before bed because that's when I remember to take it. And a couple of months ago, I had 2 containers, one for beta-alanine and one for creatine. And it was fairly late, so I actually got them mixed up and took 5 grams of beta-alanine right before bed. And
I bet that was a long night.
Yeah, that was a long night. Like it was brutal. I get the tingling from 1 gram gives me the tingles. So 5 grams, it was pretty brutal. So I was.
That's funny. I did a dosing study on myself with beta-alanine to see how much it would take, because I took it the first time and didn't feel anything, and then I took a little bit more the second time. It took me up to like 5.5 before I could feel anything. So it's so interesting that there's so many different variations between people. Some people have half a gram and they're itching their face off, and some people take 6 and they're like, I don't know what's going on. So yeah, it shows you the big interpersonal variability.
Yeah. I wish I could take 5 grams. Then it wouldn't be such a pain in the ass to take it. But yeah, 1 gram for me is, and I get the tingling and then all the full package.
Yep.
So, okay, Brad. Thank you so much for doing this interview on peri-workout nutrition. I know you have a great site that you write many great articles on. Could you please tell us a bit about that site?
Yeah, it's sciencedrivennutrition.com. So it's it's a content site. We put out a lot of articles. We're starting to do more video series, and we have a monthly journal that people can subscribe to if they're interested. It's kind of just more in-depth content where we really kind of drill down into the more sciencey side. So the website has a lot of great science-driven content. The journal is a little bit more in-depth for people who kind of need to get a little bit deeper. And it's been a fun project so far, and it's gotten a lot of good feedback, and we're growing fairly quickly. So it's been fun.
Excellent. I'll put this link to the website in the description.
Fabulous.
And once again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview, and hope we can do another topic sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an honor. It was. I've been a big fan of your work, so it's great to finally get on and chat with you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Brad, have a nice day, and we'll hopefully speak soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.